Welcome to the Winning Edge podcast, where we share focus, fueling, and faith-filled stories and strategies to give young athletes the tools they need to become the best version of themselves as athletes and individuals.
What you eat and how you think can transform your athletic performance and overall well-being. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or fitness enthusiast looking to gain that mental edge and optimize your health, this podcast is for you. We are your hosts. I'm Lindsay, former collegiate athlete, coach, educator, and educational coach for over 20 years.
And I'm Stacy, registered dietitian nutritionist for over 18 years and the mom of 2 young athletes. In this episode, we're diving into the basics of sports nutrition and how sports nutrition might actually be a little different than the general wellness nutrition advice that you're getting.
Can you explain to our listeners how sports nutrition for an athlete is differing from the general nutrition that adults are looking for?
Yeah, I'll break it down this way, I think, first. So how I would describe it is if you look at the general American population and you look at the average American, we know from statistics that 95% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. On top of that, we know that probably 1 in 3 Americans are managing diabetes. Almost 1 in 2 Americans are managing overweight or obesity. Many of them are not physically active. Many of them are getting 1 serving of the 10 servings of fruits and vegetables they should be getting a day. When you think about your athletes, which you often, and many of them, I would say for the general American, have higher rates of body fat to lean mass ratios. When you look at athletes, you often see the opposite. You see someone who has high caloric needs, who's exercising frequently, who might have a very different muscle mass to body fat ratio. Even for the athletes who look like they might be larger, they oftentimes have much higher body muscle mass than someone who might not be as physically active as them. And so really, I would say the big difference is the macronutrient and hydration needs even for a general individual versus an athlete. Oftentimes too, your young athletes are going to be younger. They're not managing or battling chronic disease. And so the way you might even treat them or provide nutrition plans for them would be very different than what you would give to someone who might be trying to truly manage their risk for chronic disease, which is what you'll find in most older Americans.
So that would mean that everything from like carbohydrate, all the different intake that they're getting is going to differ from what I'm going to be eating.
It can look very different. And so one of the things I'll kind of talk about is ratios of dietary consumption patterns. So on an individual that might be trying to manage diabetes or an individual who's trying to manage weight, oftentimes I would recommend for them a 40-30-30 dietary plan. You're like, what does that even mean, right?
Like, okay.
So 40% of their total caloric intake, so let's just say to make numbers easier and rounded, they need 2,000 calories a day. That means we would say 40% of those 2,000 calories needs to come from carbohydrate. The other 30 and 30, so 30% each coming from protein and 30% of their calories coming from fat. That's a pretty standard approach we would give to someone who's looking to manage weight and control risk for chronic disease. For athletes, their minimum amount of carbohydrates they would need in a day is 45%. And some of them can need up to 65% of their calories coming from carbohydrates.
And I've always thought, well, I mean, my nutritional experience as an athlete, we grew up, we're products of the 80s and 90s. So it was like, Kool-Aid jammers and have a fruit roll-up or a Gushers and, all this like processed food, which I didn't realize I was needing more carbohydrates. I know I was not getting the right amount of carbs then, just even from that percentage you're giving me.
And the type of carb is so different too.
Yeah.
And so
can you explain the different types?
Yeah, I think this is another really common misconception is that they can't have fruit gummies. And it's like, well, it really depends, right? This is what I would say is maybe for a young athlete who is been playing in games all day and they want some quick acting fuel to act as glucose to go for their muscles to use or to go as glycogen storage. Something like a gummies, isn't really going to be a bad option. What you don't want to be giving them when they're in the middle of back-to-back games is you don't want to say, hey, here's this high fiber bread because while it is a carbohydrate, it's going to be something that takes a lot longer to digest. The fiber amount's going to sit in their stomach longer. And so in general nutrition advice, we would tell people to aim for richer fiber content carbohydrates, things that are lower in added sugar or refined sugars. That might look very different for a young athlete, depending on the timing of when they're consuming it and fueling.
What I'm hearing you say is that I shouldn't frown upon a fruit roll-up or a Gushers at a game. Like that's not necessarily a bad thing.
It's not the worst thing
Okay.
ever. Now, is there different ways to get it? Would I say they should have an apple or have an
Right.
orange? Like,
Absolutely.
absolutely. As a dietitian, it's always going to be
Yeah.
mine because there's simple sugars
Yeah.
in those as well. It's not the worst thing. And it is the place where the types of macronutrients, the amounts of macronutrients, and the timing of those macronutrients is so specific for athletes. It's very different
So I need you to talk more about the timing, because that's something else that's like super confusing to me. But there's something you said, and I need to go back because I can almost guarantee that most of the people listening are having the same question I was wondering. What are you talking about storage? You said something about, like, what did you say?
Yeah, so when you think about carbohydrates, there's really three types of carbohydrates.
Okay.
There's sugar, there's starch, and there's fiber, which people don't think about that, right?
No.
Because just the dietitian in me is like, yes, so you really break it down in that way. And it gets to, you could break it down even farther in all of those buckets. So you could think about soluble and insoluble fiber. You could think about, you know, so we won't go into that in too much detail, but there's really three types. So ultimately, what they all do is they all break down into glucose, which is a form of fuel that your body uses to basically fuel all of your body's systems and to power your muscles. You think like glucose gets demonized or sugars get demonized, but like for athletes, these are nutrients that are really vital in helping them actually perform and function. Well, glycogen is what happens when you have abundant amount of glucose. So you've eaten all that your body needs. Your body stores it in the form of glycogen in two places, in the muscle and in the liver. And the reason why you do that is for prolonged activity, or think like even back in olden times when you went for a long period of time without eating, your body then had a natural storage mechanism that it could tap into to be able to fuel you. So you ate, you went foraging and you didn't eat for the next day, and then you had to run from a big scary cat. You needed something to tap into to go, okay, how do I fuel my muscles and get what I need? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then that's exactly why you're saying that athletes' nutrition looks so different to ours, because at a desk job, right, we don't need to have as much in our storage versus an athlete that has a weekend tournament and that volleyball player is playing 6 games.
Yes, they're depleting and turning over their glycogen storage a lot faster. And what happens for us as adults who don't need that, once you get to sort of a maximum capacity of what you can store in glycogen, what do you think happens with that?
It turns to fat.
It turns to fat. You've heard it before. And it's the thing you commonly hear. And so by over-consuming it when not being physically active, we're actually doing ourselves a disservice as average adults. Even for kiddos, this is still rings true. And so again, that physical activity component for most young athletes who are very competitive is going to be the key to rapid glycogen turnover and needing to truly replace that to perform.
So can you explain then to our listeners, like comparing just a kid who isn't doing competitive sports, they're just doing like a little league practice once a week and have one game a weekend. How would that look different with a calorie intake compared to a kid who's playing 4 nights a week, 4 games a week?
It's going to be very different.
Okay.
It's going to be very different. And I think this is where the disservice we've done in public health is that we've oversimplified nutrition and tried to make these sort of population health recommendations when nutrition really needs to be individualized. And so I'll even tell you, as a dietitian and a mom, I've been guilty of this. So we have one of our young athletes who was very active. He was playing multiple competing sports. He's since playing fewer sports. He's doing less practices. And I even wasn't as responsible as I probably should have or could have been in tailoring what was on his plate or what he was getting at meals and snacks, because he wasn't needing the amount of calories that he was getting at one point. It truly is a science, and it really does need to be individualized. And I would say for our young kiddos who are kind of just starting out and they're playing, their advice is going to be a lot more akin to general nutrition, healthy nutrition advice. We want to make sure they're getting enough servings of fruits and vegetables. We want to make sure they're limiting sodium. We want to make sure they're drinking plenty of fluids. They do need more fiber and more protein. And it's going to look more like general healthy pediatric patient populations and not as much like you would see when you get to high school and you have a male athlete who's burning 6,500 calories a day, and it's outrageous, and they're sweating a ton, and the Texas
and you need a second job just to pay for their
second job to pay for the groceries that they're
we're not ready
in their hollow leg. That is what we say with our oldest one.
I've seen it on campus. Like I have middle school kids, right? But you'll see like these middle school football players in the middle of season, and it's like their pockets are way down with all the snacks, and they go through the cafeteria line, and you'll be like, "Do you need those 5 oranges?" But they legit need those 5 oranges. And they're starving.
I think that's something too that as parents, we have to be really respectful of. It's just like honoring appetite, making sure that we're providing the right choices.
Yeah.
So if your kiddo's hungry, again, to the conversation about the gushers, like if they're hungry, give them an apple or give them an orange because it does have fiber, but it also has simple sugars in it that's going to fuel them. It's going to help them feel a lot fuller.
Yeah.
Where if they reach for the bag of gushers and then they want another bag of gushers, it's like, okay, what other option can we give you
I like that.
to kind of help with satiety too, or fullness?
It's a good balance. Right? It's all about the balance.
Yeah, and as
dietitians, feel better.
People hate this, but we're like, all foods fit and they fit in variety and moderation. And honestly, it's not about any one thing. It's about your overall pattern.
I love
that. Is what's going to be the most impactful.
I think that is such a good message. It's about your overall pattern and that there's a balance there.
Yeah, one bag of gushers at a weekend tournament game is not going to hurt you. Now, if gushers is the staple of every day and your snack when you come home from school, that's a very different conversation. So
I love that. Thank you for explaining that because that has been something that just I'm lost on. So thank you. Can you explain the difference in protein, and because there's such a push of like protein, but can you really put it in perspective for us?
Oh yeah, I love this because I got to work. I had a really interesting background. So I was working with a group at the time where I was focused on nutrition research and working with some really amazing protein researchers, Dr. Doug Padden-Jones, Dr. Donald Layman, who, if you're like, who in the world are those people? Donald Layman was actually one of the researchers who helped overturn the 2015 dietary guidelines in his research around cholesterol, basically proving that consuming cholesterol and like eating shrimp because it's high in cholesterol or eggs doesn't actually impact dietary blood cholesterol in the way we once thought it did. So he overturned those recommendations in the 2015 dietary guidelines. So I love protein. It's a fun topic for me because I spent a lot of time doing that. But I think for a general healthy American, so non-athlete, their protein needs can range anywhere from 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight per day up to about 1.5. I will tell you, for an athlete, that's going to start usually around 1.2 kilograms per gram body weight. And for some, depending on how much they're exercising, it can go up to 2.2 grams per kilogram body weight per day. Wow. So you think about your athletes who are turning over muscle really rapidly, they need to be consuming that protein to replace it, but not at the expense of other calories. And I think that's something we'll talk about too. I see a lot of young male athletes who are so worried about getting in protein, they're not actually getting their caloric needs, which can be even more damaging than not getting the right amount of protein.
So do protein shakes affect that as well? Like when you're talking about how they're getting so much protein, but they're avoiding or not getting enough of the other calories needed? Where do the protein shakes kind of fit on that?
Yeah, protein shakes are an interesting one. And one of the things that I think is really important when we talk about this topic is you need all three. So when we talk about macronutrients, we talk about carbohydrates, protein, and fat. If any one of the three of those is missing from a young athlete's diet, they are, I can assure you, not getting the building blocks that they need to be successful. And so we talked about carbohydrates looking very different. For, an average, it might be 40% for an athlete. It's 45 to 65% or higher. We talked about protein being 0.8 to 1.5 grams for an average American, being anywhere from 1.2 to 2.2 for an athlete. Fat is very similar. It should be somewhere at least 10% of your calories must be coming from fat, because people don't think about this, but fat is required for all of your fat soluble vitamins to actually be used. So vitamins A, D, E, K, which play very important roles. Think beautiful shining hair, nail growth, skin health, all of those things. So you need at least 10% of your calories, whether you're an athlete or an average American, coming from fats, and up to 35% of your fat calories can actually come. And for young athletes who are burning a lot of calories, fat is more nutrient dense. So while carbohydrates and protein are 4 calories per gram weight, fat is 9 calories per gram weight. So think it's an easy way to consume less and get the calories that you need. So if you think about that
that is so wild to me.
But you asked a question. I'm sorry, I want to go back because I wanted to give that overview.
This is so good.
You asked about protein shakes. And one of the biggest opportunities I see with protein shakes, and this can be in young male or female athletes, is that there is a condition that we call REDS. And that basically stands for relative energy deficiency in sport. And if you're wondering like, okay, well, what does that even mean? What is REDS? And like, what does it do?
Break it down for me.
Basically, it's a condition that happens in athletes who either, it can be intentionally or it can be unintentionally. Sometimes we see it intentionally with young female athletes because they're worried about specific, let's just say a female dancer or cheerleader or someone who's a wrestler, and they're trying to hit a weight class. So they can intentionally be restricting calories, or it can be unintentionally, which is what we see a lot of times with our young male athletes. And what most often we see is that these male athletes are prioritizing protein so much that they will literally get up in the morning, barely eat anything for breakfast. They might get a few calories. They don't really like what's being served at lunch at school, so they don't eat a whole lot. So then they come home and they're like, I really need to get my protein in. So as soon as they get home from their after school workout, well, they're drinking a protein shake, right? Then they're going and doing a little extra workout. Then they're trying to drink a protein shake before dinner. They're eating their chicken breast or whatever their protein on their plate is at dinner. Well, what they've just done is protein increases fullness, or what we call satiety. And so they're not getting the calories then that they need, because by putting protein first, they're actually not getting enough overall calories, even though they might be hitting their protein goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because they're setting themselves back. They're doing more harm in like loading themselves with the protein.
Yes.
And it's filling them, and so they're not getting their calories.
Yes.
So that's working against them.
And oftentimes kind of protein comes in a vehicle. So if you think most of your animal proteins, think chicken or salmon or beef or pork, whatever those might be, they often come attached to fat. And so they provide both fat and protein. Fat and protein are your most satiating nutrients. So they're the most filling nutrients. So if you eat those first, before you eat the carbohydrates that you need, then you're probably not going to be hitting. Yes, exactly. And that's oftentimes what we see. So REDS can be intentional, or it can be unintentional. I think we often see it in like endurance athletes who are expending a lot of energy because they're exercising a ton, or athletes who might be in weight sensitive sports. So we mentioned like wrestling, where they're trying to hit a weight class so that they can perform, or gymnastics is another one that we commonly see, because there's a lot of pressure to have a certain physique. And then it's just, one of the big things that we think about when we think about something like REDS is it's important that athletes are not getting only the protein and fat and carbohydrates that they need, but they're getting the calories they need, because ultimately what happens is it can impact like how healthy their metabolism is. It can cause in women, it can cause them to, or young women, not have their periods regularly, or not have a period at all.
That is so common too. I remember in high school, two of my teammates on my AAU team never got theirs, but they were playing 3 sports, and basketball we played year round because of being on our AAU team. So it was like no break. Literally soccer, basketball, practice in the afternoons, and then full winter season basketball. And then spring they were doing softball and basketball. And then we played all summer. And so I remember even, junior and senior year, some of them still weren't getting it.
Well, and it's something I think as parents, it's important for us to think about when we think about our kiddos getting the nutrition that they need. I mean, as an athlete, I remember when I was playing, I didn't mind not getting that. It's really convenient, right? But then I have to think back of like, was I getting the nutrition needed for my body to function in the way that it was supposed to be functioning? I think that's really important, but it goes beyond just even metabolic rate and menses for young women. It can do things like, and I was talking about this yesterday with my sister, because we were talking about bone health in older ages. I don't think many people realize this, but most of the bone foundation that you're going to lay is going to happen up to the age of 18 years old. When you have a condition like REDS and you're not getting the energy needs that you have, you're impacting bone density. And you really only have, for your young athletes, until age 18 to lay the strong foundation that you need for healthy bones for the rest of their lives.
And that's wild to me, because so many women, as they age, begin early onset of osteoporosis and have low bone density. And so it does make me wonder, how much of that is connected to the nutrition in their teenagers.
Yeah, and there's stuff you can do. So there's definitely is, you can slow that by diet and exercise for women. And we're not going to go into that because we're talking athletes. On a different day, we can talk that. But I do think it's just really important, again, for our parents to think about the fact that like you're truly laying the foundation for bone health for the rest of their lives, now until the age of 18. And then it also impacts things like heart health, protein, muscle synthesis. Obviously, as an athlete, you want to have great muscle mass. But then here's the caveat. The more muscle mass you have, the more calories you're going to burn at rest. So like you could have 2 athletes, both 150 pounds. And if one has 8% body fat and the other has 15% body fat, they're now going to burn very different caloric needs to maintain that muscle mass.
So one of the things that I'm so happy that you do through SPAN is you're able to tailor athletes' diets and nutrition plans directly related to their physical needs. Like that to me is a complete game changer. Like when we first started talking about all this, and it was like, oh my gosh, you can literally look at someone's blood work and you can look at their body and break everything down and know like, oh my gosh, you have a vitamin D deficiency, or you need to be getting more fatty calories during the day. Like that changes the level of
It's a game
play.
changer. It is a game changer.
It's insane.
And we're going to have a coach on. I think we mentioned this in the first episode, who he said, he told me once the secret weapon that he saw for a lot of universities and even professional teams 10, 15 years ago was the fact that they had dietitians in the dugout or dietitians in the weight room or wherever, or strength and conditioning and nutrition coaches helping them really understand what they should be consuming. It really should be individualized to every athlete.
Absolutely.
You can get general nutrition information and it's good, and it's going to give you a good foundation.
But when we're pushing these kids to the level of play that they're at now at such a young age, we have to make this a priority. Because like you're saying, it is the groundwork for their bones, for their muscle development, for their overall health. Like, the big picture is it's extending into their adult life. So
that's right. You're laying the foundation.
And we have to focus on it.
It starts even sooner. So like, no pressure on any mom listening, but I mean, it starts literally in fetal development. So we're getting more and more research that's basically showing what mom and dad eat before they even conceive the baby, what mom is eating while the baby is in the womb and growing. All of those things impact the baby's gut microbiome. They impact the health of the baby. Like these things are starting sooner than you think. And nutrition's a very new science. So we're only, we still have a lot to learn. And it's going to be really exciting as we kind of continue to crawl down this path and learn more about early onset. But for our young athletes, it's why I'm so passionate about this space, is like just truly making sure we are laying solid foundations. We talk about faith, we talk about mindset, we talk about fueling, but nutrition and having a really strong growth mindset, these are things that are going to set these kiddos up for life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm so excited for when we start going in and working with sports teams for you to bring this knowledge to them, because kids want to learn this, and parents want to learn it too. But I just think having that ability to recognize like what your body needs to be producing and operating at the best of its ability, like how exciting is that?
And it can be
wish
so
we
different.
could go back and like you could be my nutritionist when I was younger. But really, like this is, even if they don't play sports past middle school or high school, like that foundation has been laid for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can even be so different, and I'm testament to this. I have 2 boys and they have very different calorie and metabolic needs. They're 4 years difference in age. And even in our house, it's a lot of talking and understanding. My younger one wants to always be consuming exactly what the older one's consuming. It's like, no, bed, like that's not how this works. I mean, he's burning, his practices are more intense. They're longer. They're multiple days of the week. And so again, it can be so individualized and that can be challenging, but also really rewarding to walk as a parent, to kind of help them understand that like, it's personal, the same way that clothes are personal, or, there's so many things. It's very unique to you and how God made you
and how you're made. And I have changed how I approach food and dinner prep and conversations and even breakfast with my boys at home because of the work that you've done. And so I just know the impact you've had on me as a mom with 2 athletes, trying to feed them. And I'm so excited that you're able to share this knowledge with everybody who's willing to listen, because I just think it's the best thing that we can do as parents is try to keep our kids healthy.
Yeah. I love that. And I think you'll find, and this from talking with me, my philosophy isn't about demonizing food, because while food is fuel, food's also a lot of other things. It's passion, it's excitement, it's memories. It's, some of and I always laugh about this, but I'm like, people that know me really well know that like my favorite food is like canned cheese, ballpark canned cheese and pickled jalapenos.
Girl, I don't know how you do that.
And I'm a dietitian. Now, do I eat that all the time? No, but it brings back these really fond memories. I loved growing up at the ballpark, watching my 2 older brothers play baseball. And like, we would do sprint contests and I would beat the boys and I would be so excited. And like, there's just such a fond memory there of this food that I think it's important. And, it's something we work on as dietitians, is like understanding that food is fuel. And it's really important to use it that way for our young athletes, but also not associating shame around food choices, because that also can be really harmful, really damaging when these kids already have a lot of pressure.
And we're going to have a podcast episode that is just focused on the body image of athletes. And I cannot wait for that, because
We'll have a
It
great
is.
eating disorder
Oh,
dietitian too, because I
right.
think that'll be a great episode for parents
Yeah.
on how do you talk about food in a healthful way
Yeah.
that encourages good choices, but doesn't demonize any food in any sort of way.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. So you have talked about like how much calories, our athletes are supposed to be getting and how the meal plan looks different for our athletes. But you've also mentioned before the timing of the nutrition that they need. So can you explain a little bit about what that all means?
Yeah, so we talked about how carbs and protein and fat can be different for athletes. I want to, after we talk about this too, I would love to talk about hydration and take us back. But
Okay.
I think when you really think about how does timing impact the young athlete, so if you really think about, there's kind of 4 periods. So before the workout, during intense workout, post workout, and then sort of like throughout their day. The throughout their day is more like the general healthy American. We want to have stable energy. We don't want these like peaks and valleys in blood sugar, right? So that's where you do want more fiber rich carbs, more lean proteins, more moderate healthy fats, right? So the throughout the day can be really similar. And then just making sure you don't have any GI discomfort. So you're not eating like so much fiber at one time. You've got like all this gas that you can't manage. Yeah. And that would be you're eating every 3 to 4 hours. You're not doing any really big meals or any really like meals that are spiking and driving your blood glucose kind of up and down. Same for athletes as it is for the general American. I would say what's really different sort of pre-workout, during workout, and post-workout is pre-workout for athletes, you want a more carbohydrate rich meal. So you do want something that has faster acting sugars, probably 2 to 4 hours before. And then if that you can't get it in that window, you want something at least maybe an hour before, 30 minutes to an hour before, that's just a quick acting sugar. That is going to be really important. Now, if you're a general adult who's going to the gym to work out, you probably don't need that. But your athletes need that just to make sure they've got topping off, think about it, topping off their gas tank, topping off their glycogen stores. During exercise, for anything that's over about 45 minutes, 60 minutes of intense activity, this is where, and this is why I said hydration, hydration is going to be really key. So I think about hydration beverages like Gatorade. They get a lot of flack because they're like, oh, they're too high in sugar. Oh, they're too high in sodium. They're made exactly for that. So they're made for the during intense activity because who wants to go eat a piece of fruit while you're in the middle of a 60-minute football game?
And I think, you've talked about this before. You were like, water is the go-to if it's 45 minutes or less. But if it's high intensity and it's 45 to 60 minutes and more, you're going to have to supplement. And so with the Gatorades or
you want something that's going to be easy to get down while you're in the middle of sport or play that's very competitive. And so the reason why these hydration beverages were actually created is because you need glucose to absorb all of the electrolytes in there. You can't have, and this is where I kind of harp on.
Okay, go back and say that one more time.
So you need the glucose to actually absorb the potassium and calcium and magnesium and sodium that is in that electrolyte beverage. So this is where like the Gatorade Zeros, they're really not a good supplement, or they're not a good hydration vehicle for a kiddo who's an intense athlete. Who's
straight old orange Gatorade will do it.
Straight old, you need the glucose in there. Or, I mean, a G2 would be fine, a little bit reduced if you need. But also what you'll notice in your Gatorade Zeros is they're going to be a lot lower in sodium. And kiddos that are working out for longer than 60 minutes, they're going to need more sodium. They need magnesium, potassium, calcium. Well, because they're losing it when they're turning muscle over. They're losing it and using it as their muscles are firing. And so it's important that they get these things back. They're replacing the sugars that their muscles need to perform, and they're getting all the electrolytes their muscles need to contract and release and contract and release. And so that's going to be really different. And then I would say post-exercise, and this is one of my favorite ones. Post-exercise can also apply to general healthy adults, but really for our athletes, making sure they've got kind of an optimal window of about 60 minutes after exercise. They need to be replacing their glycogen stores, and they need to be getting at least probably 15 to 20 grams of protein, because they want to start to give their body the building blocks that it needs to replace muscle lost during high intensity exercise and to replace glycogen. The other thing is, and this is really important, is for athletes that are doing really intense workouts for prolonged periods of time, they can actually leave themselves open to a window where they're more likely to have a suppressed immune system and get sick if they're not refueling. Like, so let's just say you had a long tournament weekend and your kiddos just gassed and they've depleted all their glycogen stores, but you're waiting to go out to dinner with all your team and friends friends and it takes you 2 hours to get a table at the restaurant you're going to as a team.
So you need that immediate, like have those snacks.
You need those
have
snacks
those
in the
supplements
car.
in the
You need
car
something
right then.
as a replacement. Yeah.
I think that's something too that, parents can take away, like an immediate thing is, hey, when you pick your kids up from school, have the snacks already in the car.
Yes.
So you have that pre-workout snack covered, and then having those snacks ready in the car for, I think that's...
It truly is like when I think about sports nutrition, you have to have a game plan. If you don't have a game plan, it's just kind of like not having a plan for fixing your swing or not having a plan for how you're going to get faster or jump higher. It really does matter. And I think you're so right, Lindsay. Like it has to be planful and you have to think ahead a lot of times about these things.
I love it. We pay so much money in private lessons, private coaching lessons for how you pitch, how do you hit, what's your form on your swing in tennis, right? But we need to be also having these private coaching lessons for nutrition.
And it's very different than you would think, as you've heard, and I know we've covered a lot in this episode. So stay tuned because we'll kind of break these things down. I think over the next couple episodes, we'll go into deeper dives on some of these things. And we'd love you guys post a comment, give us your feedback. What do you want to learn about? What did we cover today that
you want to know more?
Yeah, you want to know more
or clarify because it was a lot. So stay tuned for future podcasts where we will bring on exciting guests in the sports world. We will highlight spotlight coaches, athletic directors, former and current collegiate and professional sports players, sports dietitians, sports psychologists, and more.
What you eat and how you think can transform your athletic performance and overall well-being. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or fitness enthusiast looking to gain that mental edge and optimize your health, this podcast is for you.
Stay tuned to learn more about how you can join our community and get more exclusive content. Don't forget to follow us on all of our social media channels, including TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and X at Span Athletics.
Until next time, stay faithful, stay fueled, and remain focused on your goals.